The morning sun cast long shadows over the rolling hills of Blue Ridge, Virginia, where acres of apple orchards stretched as far as the eye could see. 18-year-old Abigail "Abby" Mason wiped the sweat from her brow as she lifted another basket of freshly picked apples onto the truck. Her calloused hands told the story of a life spent working the land, a life that had grown increasingly difficult over the past year. "Take a break, sweetheart," called Martha, Abby's mother, from the porch of their weathered farmhouse. "You've been at it since dawn." Abby shook her head, her chestnut hair tied back in a practical ponytail. "Can't stop now, Mom. We need to get these to market before noon." The truth hung heavy between them, unspoken but ever present. The family orchard, passed down through 4 generations of Masons, was on the verge of bankruptcy. Medical bills had piled up since her father's stroke 8 months ago, and the bank had made it clear they had until the end of the month to make a substantial payment, or they would lose everything. Inside the house, Thomas Mason sat in his wheelchair by the window, watching his daughter work with a mixture of pride and despair. Once a strong, towering figure who could lift hay bales like they were pillows, he now struggled to hold a glass of water without spilling it. The stroke had taken almost everything from him: his strength, his livelihood, his dignity, but not his fierce love for his family. "She's working too hard," he mumbled to Martha as she entered the living room. Martha placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "She's your daughter through and through, Thomas, stubborn as a mule." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of tires on gravel. A sleek black SUV with tinted windows rolled up their driveway, looking completely out of place against the backdrop of their modest farm. Abby stopped loading the truck and watched as the vehicle came to a stop near the porch. The driver, a well-dressed man with an earpiece, stepped out and opened the rear door. A motorized wheelchair emerged first, followed by its occupant, a young man who couldn't have been much older than 30, with sharp features, olive skin, and intense dark eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "That's him," Martha whispered, her voice tense. "That's Ethan Montgomery." Everyone in Blue Ridge knew about Ethan Montgomery. The tech mogul had purchased the old Wilkinson estate on the mountain last year, spending millions to renovate it into what locals now called the Glass Castle. The grandson of Appalachian coal miners on his father's side and Silicon Valley tech pioneers on his mother's, Montgomery had made his fortune developing revolutionary assistive technology before a car accident left him paralyzed from the waist down 5 years ago. Since then, he'd become something of a recluse, managing his business empire remotely from his mountaintop sanctuary. There were rumors about his charitable foundation doing work in the area, but no one had actually seen him in town until now. Abby approached cautiously, wiping her hands on her jeans. "Can I help you?" Ethan Montgomery's gaze fixed on her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "Abigail Mason?" His voice was deep, with a smooth confidence that suggested he was accustomed to being obeyed. "Yes," she replied, wondering how he knew her name. "I'd like to speak with your parents. Is now a convenient time?" Nothing about this felt convenient, but Abby nodded and led the way to the house, acutely aware of the contrast between her dirt-stained clothes and Montgomery's crisp linen shirt and tailored pants. Inside, introductions were made with an awkward formality. Montgomery declined Martha's offer of lemonade, instead getting straight to the point with a directness that took everyone by surprise. "I understand your orchard is facing foreclosure," he said, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the armrest of his wheelchair, "and that your medical expenses are substantial." Thomas straightened in his wheelchair, his expression hardening with pride. "We're managing." "With all due respect, Mr. Mason, you're not," Montgomery countered. "I've reviewed your situation thoroughly. Without immediate intervention, you'll lose this property within 30 days. Your daughter will likely have to abandon her college plans to support the family, and your medical treatment will become increasingly difficult to maintain." The clinical assessment of their private struggles felt like a violation. Abby clenched, her fists ready to ask this stranger to leave when Montgomery continued. "I have a proposition that could solve all these problems." He opened a sleek tablet and pulled up a document. "I'm prepared to offer you $2 million, immediately. No loans, no interest, no repayment schedule." The room fell silent. $2 million. It was an astronomical sum to the Masons, enough to save the farm, pay off all the medical bills, and secure their future for years to come. "What's the catch?" Abby asked, her voice steady despite the shock. Montgomery turned to her, his expression unreadable. "The condition is that you, Abigail, come to live at my estate, for an indefinite period." "What?" Martha gasped. "I need a companion," Montgomery explained, his tone matter-of-fact. "Someone intelligent, capable, and discreet. Someone who understands the value of hard work and responsibility." "A companion," Thomas repeated, his voice rising with anger. "My daughter is not for sale." "I'm not proposing anything inappropriate," Montgomery clarified quickly. "She would have her own living quarters, complete privacy, and would primarily assist me with community outreach projects I've been developing. The work would be challenging but meaningful. She could continue her education, I'd cover all costs, and your family's financial troubles would be resolved." "Why me?" Abby asked, trying to process the bizarre proposal. Montgomery's eyes softened slightly. "I've been observing the community since I moved here, looking for someone with potential who needs an opportunity. Your work with the local literacy program, your grades despite your limited resources, your dedication to your family. You're exactly who I've been looking for." The implication that he had been watching her, researching her family, made Abby's skin crawl. That's crazy. I can't just leave my family and go live with a stranger." "Think of it as a job," Montgomery suggested. "A very well-compensated job with excellent benefits." "My daughter is not part of any transaction," Thomas insisted, his face flushing with anger. Montgomery turned to him with cold precision. "Mr. Mason, you have a follow-up procedure scheduled next month that your insurance won't cover. Without it, your doctors give you a very poor prognosis. Is your pride worth that risk?" The words hung in the air like a physical threat. Abby looked at her father, at the man who had taught her to climb trees and fix engines, who had worked sunrise to sunset to give her every opportunity, and saw fear in his eyes for the first time in her life. "I'll do it," she said suddenly. "Abby, no!" Martha cried. "I need to talk to my parents," Abby told Montgomery firmly. "Alone." The tech mogul inclined his head in acknowledgement. "Of course. I'll wait outside. Take all the time you need, but I should mention that this offer expires today." After he left, the small living room erupted in argument. Her parents were adamantly against the idea, but Abby stood her ground. "We don't have a choice," she insisted, tears streaming down her face. "Dad needs that surgery. We're going to lose the farm anyway. This way we save everything." "We don't even know what he really wants from you," Martha argued, her voice breaking. Abby squared her shoulders. "I can handle myself, and if things get weird, I'll leave. Period." An hour later, a contract was signed. The money would be transferred immediately. Abby would move to the Montgomery estate the following day. As Ethan Montgomery's SUV disappeared down their driveway, Abby stood on the porch, watching the dust settle back onto the road. What had she just agreed to? Her future, once as familiar and rhythmic as the seasons, now stretched before her like uncharted territory. Inside, her parents clung to each other, their relief at their financial salvation overshadowed by the price that had been paid for it. On the mountain above the valley, the glass-walled mansion caught the afternoon sun, gleaming like a distant warning. Dawn had barely broken when a sleek black SUV pulled up to the Mason farmhouse. Abby stood on the porch, a single suitcase at her feet containing everything she deemed essential for her new life. She'd spent most of the night packing and unpacking, wondering what one takes to go live with a millionaire stranger who had effectively purchased her presence. "You don't have to do this," Martha whispered, wrapping her arms around her daughter. "The money's already in our account, Mom," Abby replied, her voice steady despite the fear churning in her stomach. "Dad's surgery is scheduled for next week. It's done." Thomas wheeled himself onto the porch, his eyes red-rimmed from a sleepless night. "If he mistreats you in any way—" "I'll come straight home," Abby promised, kneeling to hug her father. She breathed in his familiar scent of aftershave and applewood, wondering when she would smell it again. The driver, the same stoic man from yesterday, loaded her suitcase into the trunk without a word. As the vehicle pulled away, Abby watched her parents grow smaller in the rear window, forcing herself not to cry. She was doing this for them, for the orchard, for generations of masons who had worked that land. The drive up the winding mountain road took almost 40 minutes. With each turn they climbed higher above the valley until Blue Ridge looked like a miniature village below. Finally, they arrived at a massive iron gate that swung open silently at their approach. The estate was even more impressive up close than the rumors suggested. The main house was a marvel of modern architecture, walls of glass and steel that seemed to grow organically from the mountainside, reflecting the sky and surrounding forest. Waterfalls had been engineered to flow around the structure, creating a moat-like barrier that was as beautiful as it was symbolic. Abby was led through a soaring atrium where a team of staff waited in a neat line. A personal chef, a housekeeper, a groundskeeper, a physical therapist, and a personal assistant who introduced herself as Victoria Fletcher. "Mr. Montgomery is in his workshop," Victoria explained, her tone efficient. "He asked me to show you to your quarters and explain the house rules." The quarters turned out to be an entire wing of the mansion, a spacious suite with a bedroom larger than the mason's entire first floor, a private bathroom with a shower that had more settings than Abby's car, and a sitting room with walls of books. "This is all for me?" Abby asked, setting her worn suitcase down beside a king-sized bed draped in linens that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. Victoria nodded curtly. "Mr. Montgomery has also arranged a complete wardrobe for you. You'll find everything in the closet. If anything doesn't fit, let me know." Opening the walk-in closet revealed rows of clothing still bearing price tags. Casual wear, formal attire, athletic clothes, even sleepwear, all in her size. It was overwhelming and somewhat invasive, as if Montgomery had studied her in ways she couldn't fathom. "Now the rules," Victoria continued, pulling out a tablet. "You're free to explore the main living areas of the house and the gardens. The north wing, where Mr. Montgomery's private quarters and medical facilities are located, is strictly off-limits, unless you're explicitly invited. The workshop is accessible only when Mr. Montgomery is present." She swiped through several screens. "You'll have no curfew, but the security system activates at 10 p.m. If you need to go out after that time, you'll need to notify security. You're not a prisoner, but Mr. Montgomery values his privacy and security above all else." "What exactly am I supposed to do here?" Abby asked, still trying to process her new reality. "Mr. Montgomery will discuss your duties personally. Now settle in. Dinner is at 7 in the main dining room. Mr. Montgomery expects punctuality." With that, Victoria left, her heels clicking on the polished concrete floors. Alone, Abby explored her new space, running her fingers over expensive furnishings and technological conveniences that seemed to anticipate her needs. A tablet on the bedside table controlled everything from the temperature to the opacity of the glass walls. She tapped it experimentally, watching in awe as the crystal-clear view of the forest instantly transformed into a frosted surface that offered privacy without sacrificing light. Despite the luxury, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She noticed small cameras positioned discreetly throughout the suite, not in private areas like the bathroom, but enough to make her uncomfortable. After a long shower and a change into clothes that still had store creases, Abby decided to explore. The mansion was a labyrinth of minimalist design, open spaces, clean lines, and technology integrated so seamlessly it seemed almost magical. Motion-activated lights guided her path, and doors opened automatically as she approached. She found herself drawn to a sound, classical music drifting from behind a set of double doors. Cautiously, she pushed one open and discovered an enormous library with two-story ceilings and walls lined with books. In the center, surrounded by holographic displays and technical drawings that hovered in the air like ghosts, sat Ethan Montgomery in his wheelchair. He didn't look up immediately. His fingers moved rapidly over a specialized keyboard, manipulating three-dimensional designs that rotated above a central table. Abby watched, mesmerized, as he worked, his focus absolute, his movements precise despite his physical limitations. "Are you going to stand there all day, or would you like to come in?" Montgomery asked without turning around. Startled, Abby stepped into the room. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to intrude." You're not intruding. This is a permitted area. Montgomery finally turned to face her, his dark eyes assessing. Have you settled in? The room is excessive, Abby replied honestly. A hint of amusement flickered across his face. Most people would say thank you. Thank you, she conceded, but I don't need all that. It's not about need. He gestured to the displays around him, which disappeared with a wave of his hand. It's about creating an environment conducive to the work we'll be doing together. And what is that work exactly? Your assistant wasn't very specific. Montgomery wheeled closer, stopping a respectful distance away. I grew up not far from here. My mother's family owned a small hardware store in town before my grandfather's innovations took them to California. I've always felt a connection to this region, despite spending most of my life elsewhere. He paused, studying her with that same unsettling intensity. Blue Ridge and the surrounding communities are dying, Abigail. The coal mines closed, the factories moved overseas. Young people leave the moment they graduate. Those who stay face limited opportunities and outdated infrastructure. I'm aware, Abby said. I've lived here my whole life. Exactly. You understand this place in ways I never could, despite my family connections. I'm planning to invest significant resources in revitalizing the area, educational initiatives, sustainable agriculture, technical training for displaced workers, support for female entrepreneurs in rural communities. Abby crossed her arms. And you need me for that because I need someone who can be my eyes and ears on the ground. Someone who can tell me when my ideas are tone-deaf or impractical. Someone the locals might actually trust, unlike me. He gestured to himself with a self-deprecating smile. I'm the rich outsider in the glass house on the hill. You're one of them. It made a certain kind of sense, but Abby still felt there was more to the story. You could have hired anyone. For that, you didn't need to buy me. Montgomery's expression hardened. I didn't buy you. I offered your family financial assistance with certain conditions attached. You agreed to those conditions. Because we were desperate and you knew it. Abby shot back, her temper flaring. That's not exactly a fair negotiation. Life isn't fair, he replied coldly. I learned that when a drunk driver took my ability to walk. Your father learned it when his stroke took his livelihood. The question is what we do with the hand we're dealt. The statement hung between them, challenging and undeniable. Before Abby could respond, Victoria appeared at the door. Mr. Montgomery, your physical therapy session is scheduled to begin in 5 minutes. Montgomery nodded. We'll continue this discussion at dinner, Abigail. It wasn't a request. Left alone in the library, Abby wandered among the shelves, trailing her fingers, along leather-bound classics and modern first editions. A section dedicated to Appalachian history caught her eye. Detailed accounts of the region's coal mining past, its economic struggles, its resilient culture. On a separate shelf, she found something unexpected. A collection of children's books well worn from repeated reading. She pulled one out, surprised to find an inscription inside. To my darling Ethan, may you always see the magic in everyday things. Love, Mom. The discovery humanized Montgomery in a way their conversation hadn't. He wasn't just the calculating businessman who had orchestrated her presence here. He was someone's beloved child once, someone who treasured his mother's gifts. A gentle chime sounded throughout the house, signaling dinner. Abby replaced the book and made her way to the dining room, where a table that could seat 20 was set for 2 at opposite ends. Montgomery was already positioned at the head, looking regal and remote. As servers brought out course after course of expertly prepared food, Abby struggled with the array of silverware and the unfamiliar dishes. She could feel Montgomery watching her, assessing her reactions, reading her discomfort. I didn't grow up eating whatever this is, she finally said, poking at a delicate arrangement of seafood. Scallop crudo, Montgomery supplied. And no, I don't expect you did. But part of your education here will include exposure to experiences beyond Blue Ridge. Is that what I am to you? A project? Someone to educate and improve? Montgomery took a sip of water, considering his response. Everyone is shaped by their environment and opportunities, Abigail. I'm simply offering you both in abundance. And what do you get out of it? For the first time, Montgomery seemed genuinely taken aback by her directness. Perhaps I'm tired of being surrounded by people who only tell me what they think I want to hear. Perhaps I need someone who will challenge me, who sees the world differently than I do. Or perhaps you're just lonely up here in your glass castle, Abby suggested boldly. His expression turned guarded. We all have our reasons for the choices we make. You chose to come here to save your family's farm and your father's health. I chose to bring you here because I believe you have potential that would be wasted picking apples for the rest of your life. The assessment stung, despite its kernel of truth. Abby had always dreamed of more than the orchard, but hearing her, life dismissed so casually by this privileged stranger, ignited her defiance. You don't know the first thing about me or my life, she said, pushing back from the table. And you can't just buy people when you're lonely. For a moment, raw emotion flashed across Montgomery's face. Anger, certainly, but something else too. Something that looked almost like pain. Then his expression smoothed back into cool detachment. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 8. We're visiting the site for the new technical training center. He turned his wheelchair away, effectively dismissing her. The car will take you to see your parents this weekend if you wish. Good night, Abigail. Back in her room, Abby stood at the glass wall looking down at the twinkling lights of Blue Ridge in the valley below. She pressed her palm against the cool surface, feeling trapped despite the breathtaking view. What had she gotten herself into? And more importantly, what did Ethan Montgomery really want from her? In the distance, storm clouds gathered over the mountains, promising change in the still night air. The weeks turned into months, and as summer gave way to fall, a tentative routine emerged in Abby's new life at the glass mansion. Each morning, she would wake before sunrise, drawn to the east-facing windows where she could watch dawn break over the mountains, a ritual that connected her to the rhythms of the farm she'd left behind. She spent her days accompanying Montgomery to community meetings, site visits, and planning sessions for what was now being called the Blue Ridge Renaissance Initiative. At first, locals had been skeptical of the wealthy outsider and his grand plans, but Montgomery's substantial investments began to speak for themselves. A vacant textile mill was being transformed into a technical training center. A new farmers' market pavilion was under construction in the town square. Scholarships were awarded to local students pursuing healthcare degrees. Despite her initial resistance, Abby found herself drawn into the work. She knew these people, had grown up alongside them, understood their pride and their struggles in a way Montgomery never could. Increasingly, she served as a bridge between his world and theirs, translating his vision into language that resonated with the community and bringing their concerns back to him with unfiltered honesty. The training programs need childcare services, she insisted one evening as they reviewed plans in the library. Most of the women who want to participate are single mothers. They can't attend classes if they have nowhere safe to leave their kids. Montgomery frowned, but made a note on his tablet. That wasn't in the budget. Then adjust the budget, Abby countered, no longer intimidated by his wealth or position. Without childcare, you're excluding the people who need these opportunities most. To her surprise, he nodded. You're right. I'll have Victoria work on it tomorrow. These small victories fueled Abby's growing confidence. The quiet, compliant girl who had arrived at the mansion in early summer was fading, replaced by a young woman who spoke her mind and fought for what she believed in. She had begun taking online courses, paid for by Montgomery as promised, and devoured books from his extensive library, staying up late into the night reading about economics, sustainable agriculture, and community development. Her twice-monthly visits home showed the tangible effects of Montgomery's deal. The farm was thriving under new management hired by her parents. Her father's health was improving steadily, with access to specialized care. The foreclosure notices that had once covered their refrigerator were gone, replaced by pictures of her. Parents on their first vacation in 15 years, a weekend trip to the coast that would have been unimaginable before. Yet, despite these positive changes, Abby couldn't ignore the peculiar nature of her arrangement with Montgomery. Their relationship defied easy categorization. He was not quite an employer, not quite a mentor, certainly not a friend. He remained enigmatic, revealing little about himself despite their constant proximity. It was during an October thunderstorm that the carefully maintained walls between them began to crack. The power had gone out throughout the mansion, and even the backup generators were struggling with the ferocity of the weather. Abby found Montgomery in his workshop, illuminated only by emergency lighting, frantically trying to save data on his specialized equipment. "Victoria says we need to move to the interior rooms," she called over the howling wind that battered the glass walls. "The storm's getting worse." "I need 5 more minutes," he replied, not looking up from his work. "The meteorologist on the news said there's rotation in the clouds. We need to go now." Montgomery continued working as if he hadn't heard her. Frustrated, Abby moved to his side, trying to see what could possibly be so important. On the screen was a complex medical diagram, what appeared to be a spinal cord with detailed annotations and experimental treatment protocols. "Is this for you?" she asked quietly, his hands stilled on the keyboard. "Yes." "You're researching treatments for your condition." "I'm developing treatments," he corrected. "Or trying to. The damage to my spinal cord was severe but not complete. There's potential for recovery with the right approach." Before Abby could respond, a deafening crack filled the air as a tree branch crashed against the glass wall. Though the reinforced glass held, the impact was enough to jolt them both. "That's it. We're going," Abby declared, grabbing the handles of his wheelchair. "I can move myself," Montgomery snapped, brushing her hands away. "Not fast enough," she retorted, pushing him toward the door despite his protests. They made their way through darkened hallways to a reinforced safe room at the center of the mansion, where Victoria and the rest of the staff were already gathered. The tension between them lingered as the storm raged outside, rattling the structure with its fury. Hours later, when the danger had passed and the power slowly returned, Abby found Montgomery on the observation deck, surveying the damage to the grounds. Fallen trees littered the manicured lawns, and debris from the forest had been carried up to the very edges of the house. "I apologize for my behavior earlier," he said without turning around. "You were right to insist we move to safety. You're not used to people telling you what to do," Abby observed, leaning against the railing beside his wheelchair. "No," he admitted with a small smile. "It's refreshing, actually." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching as the groundskeeper began the process of clearing fallen branches. "The research I was working on," Montgomery said, finally. "It's been my focus for the past 5 years. The accident that paralyzed me, it shouldn't have happened." "What do you mean?" His expression darkened. "It was preventable. A software malfunction in a self-driving vehicle, a prototype my company was developing. I was the test subject." "Your own technology did this to you?" Abby asked, stunned. "Ironic, isn't it? The tech prodigy crippled by his own creation." His bitter laugh held no humor. "After the accident, everyone expected me to give up, to accept my condition and focus on making the most of my new normal. But I refused to accept limitations imposed by circumstance." There was something both admirable and disturbing about his determination. "Is that why you live up here? To focus on your research?" "Partly," he acknowledged, "but also because I grew tired of being the object of pity or morbid fascination. People see the wheelchair before they see me." He turned to look at her directly. "You did too at first." Abby couldn't deny it. "Yes, but now I see someone stubborn, brilliant, occasionally infuriating, and completely terrible at accepting help." That surprised a genuine laugh out of him, a warm, rich sound she'd never heard before. "My mother used to say the same thing. Not the brilliant part, but definitely the stubborn and infuriating parts." "Tell me about her," Abby said, seizing the rare moment of openness. Montgomery's expression softened. "Elena Montgomery. She was extraordinary, brilliant, compassionate, fearless. She grew up not far from your family's orchard, actually. Met my father when he came to the area recruiting engineering talent for his tech firm in California. She was the only woman in her graduating class at Virginia Tech." "What happened to her?" "Cancer, when I was 14. His voice grew distant. "She fought it for 3 years, never complained, never gave up. At the end, she made me promise to use my privilege and abilities to make a difference, not just to create technology for its own sake, but to solve real problems for real people. Like the initiatives you're funding here in Blue Ridge. Yes, though it took me too long to fulfill that promise. I got caught up in the Silicon Valley. Rat race, chasing innovations and profits, measuring success in stock values and market share. He gestured to his wheelchair. Sometimes the universe has to hit you over the head before you remember what matters. The vulnerability in his confession touched something in Abby. For the first time, she saw him not as the powerful tech mogul who had upended her life, but as someone shaped by his own losses and struggles. "Is that why you brought me here?" she asked. "Because I remind you of your mother." Montgomery considered the question carefully. "Perhaps in part. You have her determination, her connection to this place. But you're not a replacement or a proxy, Abigail. You're here because you bring a perspective I desperately need. Honest, grounded, unclouded by sycophancy or ambition." "Well, I've definitely got the honest part down," she said with a smile. "Indeed, sometimes brutally so." He checked his watch. "The representatives from the Department of Agriculture will be here in an hour to discuss the sustainable farming initiative I should prepare." As he turned his wheelchair to leave, Abby called after him, "Montgomery, thank you for telling me about your mother. And for what it's worth, I think she'd be proud of what you're trying to do here." Something flashed in his eyes, gratitude perhaps, or recognition. With a nod, he disappeared into the house, leaving Abby alone with her thoughts and the storm-cleared sky above. The next morning, Abby found a small package outside her door, a first edition of The Secret Garden, with a note that simply read, "This was her favorite. She would have wanted you to have it. M." The gesture marked a turning point. Though Montgomery remained reserved, moments of genuine connection began to punctuate their professional relationship. He started joining her for morning coffee on the terrace, listening with unexpected interest as she shared stories about growing up. In Blue Ridge, he taught her to play chess, revealing a patient side she hadn't seen before. And gradually he began to include her in decisions about the initiatives, valuing her input not just as a local liaison, but as a partner. The community noticed the change as well. At public meetings, he would defer to her on questions about local impact. When resistance arose to certain proposals, he allowed her to take the lead in negotiations. Her presence softened his image, transforming him from the remote millionaire in the glass castle to someone invested in the region's future. 4 months after her arrival at the mansion, the first phase of the Technical Training Center opened. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, the mayor of Blue Ridge presented both Montgomery and Abby with keys to the city. As photographers captured the moment, Abby realized that Montgomery had positioned his wheelchair slightly behind her, allowing her to be the focus of the attention. "This should be your moment," she whispered to him during the applause. "It's yours," he replied simply. "You earned it." Later that evening, as they sat in the library reviewing press coverage of the event, Montgomery seemed unusually contemplative. "What's on your mind?" Abby asked, closing her laptop. "I'm considering a change," he said after a moment. "The medical research I've been pursuing, there's a specialist in Switzerland who's doing promising work with neural interfaces. I've been corresponding with his team about a new treatment protocol." Abby felt a flutter of concern. "Is it dangerous?" "Experimental," he acknowledged, "but potentially transformative." "And you want to try it?" "Yes, which would mean traveling to Zurich for at least 3 months. The implications of his absence hit Abby unexpectedly hard. The mansion would feel empty without their daily interactions, their challenging conversations, their growing camaraderie. "When would you leave?" she asked, trying to keep her tone neutral. "Next month, and I'd like you to come with me." Of fee, all the responses she'd anticipated, this wasn't one of them. "To Switzerland? Why?" "Because the work we're doing here matters to me, and I don't want to lose momentum. We can continue remotely, video conferences, virtual site visits, and because," he hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain, "because I've grown accustomed to your perspective, your company." It was the closest thing to a personal admission he'd ever made. Abby found herself speechless, caught between her growing attachment to Montgomery and her ties to Blue Ridge. "What about my family? "The community projects?" she asked. "Your family would want what's best for your future," he said. "And as for the projects, they're well underway now. Victoria can manage the day-to-day operations for a few months." Abby walked to the window, gathering her thoughts. Below, the valley stretched out, the lights of her hometown glittering in the distance. She thought of her father, now recovering steadily, and her mother, who had called just yesterday to share plans for expanding the orchard. "I need time to think about it," she said finally. Montgomery nodded. "Of course. It's a significant change. Take all the time you need." The following weekend, Abby drove herself home to the farm. The autumn harvest was in full swing, and the orchard bustled with workers picking the last of the season's apples. Her father, now able to walk with the assistance of a cane, supervised from the edge of the grove. "There's my girl," he called when he spotted her, his smile wide and genuine. As they sat on the porch that evening, her parents asking about her work, sharing local gossip, making plans for Thanksgiving, Abby realized how much had changed in just a few months. Not just the obvious improvements to the farm and her father's health, but more subtle shifts. Her mother seemed less careworn. Her father's pride in her was palpable, and she herself felt different, more confident, more purposeful. "Mr. Montgomery wants me to go to Switzerland with him," she told them over dinner. "He's seeking medical treatment there, would be gone for 3 months. Her parents exchanged glances. "Do you want to go?" her mother asked carefully. "I don't." "No," Abby admitted. "Part of me is curious about seeing another part of the world, and the work we're doing together feels important." "And part of you is worried about getting too close to him," her father observed. Abby looked up, startled by his perception. "What do you mean?" "Sweetheart, you talk about him constantly," Martha said gently. "The way your face lights up when you describe your projects together. It's not just professional pride." "That's ridiculous," Abby protested, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. "He's my boss or my sponsor, whatever this arrangement is." "Life rarely fits into neat categories," Thomas said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "When I met your mother, she was engaged to someone else. Sometimes the heart finds its way despite the circumstances." The suggestion that she might have feelings for Montgomery beyond respect and cautious friendship was too overwhelming to contemplate. Even if that were true, and I'm not saying it is, the situation is impossible. Our worlds are too different. And he sees me as a project, not a what, Martha pressed. "Not an equal," Abby finished, though she wasn't entirely sure that was still true. Later that night, as she lay in her childhood bedroom, looking up at the glow-in-the-dark stars she'd pasted on the ceiling as a child, Abby confronted the confusion in her heart. The man who had once seemed cold and calculating had revealed depths of vulnerability and compassion she couldn't have imagined. Their intellectual connection had grown into something she valued deeply. And yes, there were moments. A look held. Too long, a smile that seemed meant only for her, that suggested the possibility of more. But the foundation of their relationship remained transactional. He had bought her presence in his life. No matter how far they had moved beyond those initial terms, that uncomfortable truth remained. As dawn broke over the orchard, Abby made her decision. She would go to Switzerland, not as a step towards something personal with Montgomery, but as an opportunity to learn, to grow, to see more of the world than she had ever imagined possible, and perhaps, away from the glass mansion and its complex dynamics, she would gain clarity about what she truly wanted for her future. When she returned to the estate Sunday evening, she found Montgomery in the atrium, working on a digital rendering of a new community garden planned for the local elementary school. "I'll go with you," she said without preamble, "to Switzerland." He looked up, his expression carefully neutral. "I'm glad. I think it will be beneficial for both of us." "I have conditions," she continued. "I want to continue my online courses while we're there. I want to return for my father's birthday in January. And I want a clear definition of my role, professional boundaries that we both respect." Something flickered in Montgomery's eyes. Disappointment? Relief? She couldn't tell. "Those terms are acceptable," he said formally, extending his hand as if to seal a business deal. Abby took it, feeling the warmth of his palm against hers, the strength in his grip. Whatever lay ahead in Switzerland, she sensed that the careful balance they had established over these past months was about to shift irrevocably. Zurich in winter was nothing like Abby had imagined. The pristine city, nestled between snow-capped mountains and a crystalline lake, seemed to exist in a different reality from the rural Virginia she had known all her life. Montgomery had arranged for them to stay in a converted historic mansion overlooking the water, less ostentatious than his glass castle in Blue Ridge, but no less luxurious. Their days quickly fell into a rhythm. Mornings were dedicated to remote work on the Blue Ridge initiatives, with Abby leading video conferences with local partners, while Montgomery monitored their progress. Afternoons saw him at the medical research center, undergoing treatments and consultations, while Abby explored the city or attended online lectures from her suite. The neural interface treatments were grueling. Abby hadn't realized how physically taxing the experimental therapy would be until she saw Montgomery return from a session, his face drawn with fatigue, his hands trembling slightly as he maneuvered his wheelchair through the doorway. "You should rest," she urged after a particularly difficult day, when he insisted on reviewing architectural plans for the new women's business incubator back in Blue Ridge. "I'm fine," he replied dismissively, though the shadows under his eyes suggested otherwise. "You're not fine, you're pushing yourself too hard." Abby closed his laptop firmly. The project can wait until tomorrow. Instead of the resistance she expected, Montgomery exhaled deeply, as if relieved to have someone force the decision. "Perhaps you're right." It was a small victory, but it established a new dynamic between them. Away from the structured environment of the glass mansion and its ever-present staff, their relationship grew more fluid, more equal. Montgomery began to rely on her not just for professional input, but for personal support, a dependence that seemed to both comfort and unsettle him. One evening in late December, as snow fell softly outside their shared living space, Abby found him staring out at the lake, a glass of untouched whiskey in his hand. "Bad day?" she asked, settling into a chair beside him. "The treatments aren't progressing as quickly as the doctors had hoped," he admitted. "They're recalibrating their approach." "I'm sorry." She hesitated, then added, "You never talk about what it's like, the treatments." Montgomery was silent for so long that Abby thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost confessional. "Imagine feeling everything and nothing simultaneously. They stimulate the neural pathways that should connect my brain to my legs, creating phantom sensations, pressure, temperature, sometimes pain. My brain thinks I'm moving, but my body doesn't respond. It's disorienting." "Does it hurt?" "Not physically most of the time, but there's a psychological toll to repeatedly experiencing the gap between expectation and reality." He took a sip of his whiskey. "Hope can be its own form of torture." The vulnerability in his voice moved her. Without thinking, Abby reached out and placed her hand over his. "But you keep trying anyway." "What's the alternative?" "Acceptance." He shook his head. "I've never been good at accepting limitations." "There's a difference between acceptance and surrender," Abby said gently. "Sometimes acknowledging where you are is the first step to moving forward." Montgomery looked down at their hands, then slowly turned his palm upward to interlace his fingers with hers. The gesture, simple as it was, carried a weight of meaning neither of them seemed ready to articulate. "How did you get so wise, Abigail?" "Mason?" he asked with a small smile. "Growing up watching apple trees," she replied. "They bend with the seasons but never break. They know when to bloom and when to rest." The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. Then Montgomery's phone chimed with an incoming video call from Victoria, breaking the spell. They separated, moving back into their professional roles with practiced ease, but something had shifted, a threshold crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. As Christmas approached, Abby found herself struggling with homesickness. It would be her first holiday away from her family, and though Montgomery had arranged for daily video calls and had extravagant gifts delivered to the farm, the distance felt particularly acute during the festive season. Sensing her melancholy, Montgomery surprised her one morning with an unexpected suggestion. "Pack an overnight bag. We're taking a short trip." Hours later, they were traveling by private train car through the Swiss countryside, the spectacular winter landscape unfolding outside their windows. Montgomery was unusually animated, pointing out historic villages and telling stories about places he had visited in his youth. "Where exactly are we going?" Abby asked, as the train began to climb into the mountains. "Somewhere special," was all he would say. Their destination turned out to be a remote chalet in the Alps, accessible only by a funicular railway that climbed steeply up the mountainside. Designed to be fully accessible, the chalet featured panoramic views of the surrounding peaks and valleys, with not another building in sight. "This place belongs to an old friend," Montgomery explained as they settled in. "He lends it to me when I need perspective." That evening, as they sat before a roaring fire sharing a simple meal of local cheese, bread and wine, the isolation of the chalet created an intimacy that had been impossible in their usual environments. Here, there were no staff, no cameras, no reminders of their unusual arrangement, just two people enjoying each other's company against the backdrop of a winter wonderland. "I've never seen stars like this," Abby marveled later, as they sat on the heated terrace bundled in blankets against the cold. "The lack of light pollution," Montgomery explained. "We're seeing the sky as our ancestors did for thousands of years. It makes me feel small, but in a good way, you know, like my problems aren't as big as they seem." Montgomery nodded thoughtfully. "I came here after my accident, spent weeks staring at these same stars, trying to make sense of what had happened to me. I was so angry at the world, at my own technology, at the randomness of fate. What changed? One night I saw a shooting star. Childish as it sounds, I made a wish. Not that I would walk again, but that I would find purpose in whatever life I had left." He smiled ruefully. "The next morning, I started drafting plans for the Blue Ridge Initiative. And now here we are," Abby murmured. "Here we are," he echoed, his gaze shifting from the stars to her face. "I never expected you, Abigail." The quiet admission hung between them in the frosty air. Abby felt her heart quicken, aware that they were approaching another threshold, one far more consequential than a momentary touch of hands. "What did you expect when you made that offer to my family?" she asked, needing to understand the journey that had brought them to this point. Montgomery considered the question carefully. "I expected compliance, gratitude perhaps. I thought I was being generous, offering opportunity in exchange for companionship. I didn't realize—" "What?" "That you would change everything, that you would make me question assumptions I've held my entire life, that you would become—" He paused, searching for the right word. "Essential." The naked honesty in his voice made Abby's breath catch. For months she had been fighting her growing feelings for him, telling herself that their relationship was fundamentally compromised by its beginning. But here, under the vast canopy of stars, those objections seemed to fade in importance. "I was so angry with you at first," she confessed. "I felt like you had taken advantage of my family's situation, like I was some kind of possession." "You were right to be angry," Montgomery acknowledged. "My approach was presumptuous, controlling. I've spent my life solving problems with money and technology, treating human relationships as variables in an equation. You deserved better. And now? Now I understand that what's between us can't be quantified or controlled. It simply is." He reached for her hand across the space between their chairs. "The question is what we do about it." Abby looked down at their joined hands, aware that they were standing at a crossroads. The professional boundaries she had insisted on maintaining seemed increasingly arbitrary in the face of their deepening connection. "I don't know," she admitted. "This is complicated. You're still technically my employer. There's still a power imbalance." "Then let's eliminate it," Montgomery said decisively. "When we return to Zurich, I'll have the lawyers draft documents releasing you from our original agreement. The money remains with your family, no strings attached. You stay or go entirely by choice." The offer took her by surprise. "You would do that?" "I should have done it months ago," he replied. "Whatever happens between us now should be because we both freely choose it." not because of a contract signed in desperate circumstances. Before Abby could respond, a sharp pain crossed Montgomery's face. He pressed a hand to his lower back, grimacing. "What's wrong?" she asked, alarmed. "Just muscle spasms, a common side effect of the treatments." He tried to smile reassuringly, but another spasm hit, this one clearly more intense. "Actually, I might need my medication. It's in my bag." Abby hurried inside to retrieve his pills, her mind racing with the implications of their conversation. By the time she returned, Montgomery's condition had deteriorated. He was pale and sweating despite the cold, his breathing labored. "This isn't normal," she said, helping him take the medication. "Should I call someone?" "There's a doctor in the village," he admitted reluctantly. "His number is in my phone." The next few hours were a blur of activity. The local doctor arrived by snowmobile, diagnosed a severe reaction to Montgomery's latest treatment, and administered emergency medication to stabilize him. By dawn, the crisis had passed, but the doctor insisted on monitoring him throughout the day. Abby stayed by Montgomery's side, alternating between concern and relief as his color gradually returned to normal. As he drifted in and out of sleep, sedated by the medication, she found herself studying his face. The strong jawline now relaxed in slumber, the furrow between his brows that never quite disappeared even in rest, the dark lashes against his cheeks. When had this complicated, challenging man become so important to her? When had his well-being started to matter more than the confusion of their circumstances? As evening approached, Montgomery woke fully, seeming embarrassed by his vulnerability. "It's not exactly how I planned our getaway," he said, attempting humor. "You scared me," Abby admitted, perching on the edge of his bed. "The doctor said you should have disclosed your symptoms earlier. The treatment protocol might need adjustments." "I didn't want to alarm anyone or show weakness." "That's ridiculous," she said firmly. "Being human isn't a weakness, Ethan." It was the first time she had used his first name, and they both registered the shift it represented. He reached for her hand and she gave it willingly. "About what I said earlier," he began. "Let's talk about it when you're stronger," Abby suggested, suddenly uncertain. The medical emergency had thrown her emotions into sharp relief, revealing the depth of her feelings, but also amplifying her concerns about their complexity. Montgomery nodded, accepting the temporary reprieve. As he drifted back to sleep, still holding her hand, Abby gazed out at the mountains, bathed in twilight. Whatever path they chose from here would change both their lives irrevocably. The question was whether they were truly free to choose it, whether enough time and understanding had passed to transform what began as an uneven transaction into something authentic and equal. The answer, she realized, awaited them back in Firesome Blue Ridge, where their story had begun. Only by returning to where the power imbalance was at its most visible could they honestly assess what had grown between them in its place. When they returned to Zurich 2 days later, Montgomery seemed withdrawn, focused intently on his treatments and their remote work. The intimacy of the chalet felt like a dream, present in stolen glances and lingering touches, but never directly addressed. As January turned to February, the doctors announced a breakthrough. Montgomery had regained limited sensation in his upper legs, a promising sign that the neural interfaces were creating new pathways. "We should celebrate," Abby suggested when he shared the news. "It's what you've been working toward all these years." "It's preliminary," he cautioned, "and there's a long way to go before functional recovery, if that's even possible." "Still, it's hope." Montgomery considered this, then nodded. "You're right, how about dinner? There's a restaurant on the lake I've been meaning to show you." The evening that followed had all the hallmarks of a date: fine dining, candlelight, conversation that drifted far from their professional concerns. As they shared dessert, Montgomery finally broached the subject they had been avoiding. "I've been thinking about what happens when we return to Virginia next month," he said. "About what I said in the chalet." Abby set down her fork. "So have I." "I meant it, Abigail. I want to release you from our agreement. No conditions, no expectations. And if I choose to stay, then we figure out what that looks like. Together." He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "But I need you to know that your freedom matters More to me than any feelings I might have developed. I won't use what's between us to influence your choice." The sentiment was touching, but it also highlighted the fundamental question that had been haunting Abby. How can I know for sure what I feel for you? This whole situation is so complicated. You literally bought my presence in your life. What if everything I feel is just Stockholm Syndrome? Montgomery flinched as if she had struck him. Is that what you think this is? No, she said quickly, but I need to be sure. I need to understand my own heart before I can offer it to anyone. What would help you gain that clarity? Abby had been pondering this question for weeks. Time, space, a chance to explore who I am apart from you and what you've made possible in my life. You want to leave, he concluded, his voice carefully neutral. Not permanently, but when we go back to Blue Ridge, I think I should move out of the glass mansion, get my own place in town, work on the initiatives as a true partner, not a whatever I am now. Montgomery was quiet for a long moment, absently tracing the rim of his wine glass. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but determined. I want you to be sure, Abigail, whatever it takes. If you need space, you'll have it. If you need time, take it. I'll be there when you're ready, if you're ever ready. The relief Abby felt at his understanding was tempered by an unexpected pang of loss. The prospect of no longer sharing daily life with this complex, challenging man was more painful than she had anticipated, but she knew it was necessary, the only way to break free of the lingering shadow of their beginning and discover what might be possible on truly equal ground. As they walked along the moonlit lake after dinner, Montgomery stopped at a scenic overlook. "Before we return to the real world and all its complications," he said quietly, "there's something I need to tell you, something I should have shared long ago." The seriousness in his tone made Abby's heart skip. "What is it?" "The reason I chose your family. It wasn't random, or just because I observed your potential." He took a deep breath. "Your grandmother, Marion Mason, saved my mother's life when they were teenagers. There was an accident at the old quarry. My mother nearly drowned. Your grandmother pulled her out, performed CPR, stayed with her until help arrived." Abby stared at him in shock. "My grandmother never mentioned this. Few people knew, but my mother never forgot. When she was dying, she made me promise to look out for the Mason family if they ever needed help. I'd been monitoring the situation with your father's health and the orchard for months before I approached you." The revelation cast their entire history in a new light. "Why didn't you tell me this from the beginning?" "Pride, partly. I wanted to believe I was acting purely from business logic and philanthropy, not fulfilling a deathbed promise, and—" he hesitated. "I was afraid you would see it as charity rather than the opportunity it was meant to be. So, all this time—" "The initial approach was because of the promise," Montgomery acknowledged, "but everything since, the work we've done together, what's grown between us, that had nothing to do with my mother's wish. That was just you, Abigail, just us." As they stood there in the moonlight, the complex tapestry of their connection unfurled before them. Threads of obligation, gratitude, professional respect, and deepening personal attachment woven together into something neither could have predicted when they first met at the Mason farmhouse. "Thank you for telling me," Abby said finally. "It doesn't change my mind about needing space when we go back, but it helps to understand." Montgomery nodded, accepting her decision. "Whatever happens when we return to Blue Ridge, know this. Meeting you has been the most unexpected gift of my life. You've taught me that true connection can't be bought or controlled. It can only be offered freely and received with gratitude." As they made their way back to their lodgings, walking side by side but not touching, Abby felt both the weight and the promise of choices yet to be made. The journey that had begun with a desperate transaction had led them here, to the precipice of something authentic and freely chosen, if only they could find the courage to reach for it. Spring arrived, early in Blue Ridge. By the time Abby and Montgomery returned from Switzerland in late March, the Mason orchard was already blanketed in delicate pink blossoms. True to his word, Montgomery had arranged for Abby to have her own apartment in town, a spacious loft above the newly renovated community center. The legal documents releasing her from their original agreement had been signed before leaving, Zurich, formally ending her obligation to the Montgomery estate. The separation was both liberating and disorienting. After months of constant proximity, Abby found herself missing their quiet moments of connection. They maintained a cordial, professional relationship at meetings and project sites, with Montgomery respecting the boundaries she had established. This distance gave Abby the perspective she needed. Without Montgomery's daily influence, she rediscovered herself, reconnecting with friends, taking photography classes, and visiting her parents often. She recognized her own accomplishments. The training programs she designed were graduating their first students. The Women's Business Incubator had launched 10 new ventures, and the Sustainable Agriculture Initiative was thriving. "You've built something remarkable here," her father told her one Sunday as they walked through the orchard. "I had help," Abby replied, thinking of Montgomery's resources. "Of course you did. No one does anything worthwhile alone," Thomas said. "But the vision, the heart of it, that's all you, sweetheart." His words reinforced a growing realization. What she had accomplished was a true collaboration. She and Montgomery had created something together that neither could have managed alone. Similarly, her feelings for him weren't born of dependency or gratitude, but genuine connection founded on mutual respect and shared values. Meanwhile, Montgomery faced his own challenges. The treatments in Switzerland had produced modest improvements in sensation, but no functional recovery. His research team recommended a more aggressive protocol, requiring another extended stay abroad. "I've decided not to pursue further treatments at this time," he announced at a foundation board meeting. Later, when they were alone, Abby asked why the doctors were optimistic. Montgomery sighed, absently rubbing his thigh. "The probability of improvement doesn't justify the disruption to our work here, and I'm learning to make peace with my limitations." "That doesn't sound like the Ethan Montgomery I know," Abby said, using his first name deliberately. "Perhaps I'm evolving. You once told me there's a difference between acceptance and surrender. I'm finally beginning to understand what that means." Soon after, Montgomery asked Abby to help plan a midsummer gala for the foundation. These planning sessions became a bridge between their professional relationship and personal connection. Meeting several evenings a week at the Glass Mansion, they rediscovered their easy rapport, sharing stories and lingering after meetings to talk about books, films, and dreams. The night of the gala transformed the mansion into a wonderland of lights and music. Abby wore an emerald green gown that complemented her chestnut hair. As the orchestra played a waltz, Montgomery approached her, his wheelchair elevating until he was at standing height. "One of the benefits of running a tech company specializing in assistive devices," he explained with a smile as they began to sway gently to the music. "Everyone is staring," Abby murmured. "Let them," Montgomery replied. "I've spent too much time caring what others think." As they moved together, Abby felt the last remnants of hesitation falling away. "I've missed you. These past few months gave me the perspective I needed, but I've missed this. Missed you." "And what did that perspective reveal?" Montgomery asked. "That what's between us isn't about where we started. It's about who we've become together. We've changed each other for the better." "I love you, Abigail Mason," he whispered. "Not as a project or an investment. Just you, exactly as you are." "I love you too," she replied. "And that terrifies me." "Why?" "Because it would be so easy to get lost in your world, to become an extension of you rather than my own person." "Perhaps the answer isn't to resist the pull, but to find balance," Montgomery suggested. "Like binary stars orbiting a common center, each with their own mass and trajectory, neither dominating the other." Their moment was interrupted by Victoria, rushing toward them. "Mr. Montgomery, Raymond Wells is threatening to pull all funding from the foundation. He's making accusations about your relationship with Ms. Mason being inappropriate, suggesting her leadership position was due to personal rather than professional considerations." The accusation gave ugly voice to the very power dynamics they had worked so hard to overcome. "We knew this was a possibility," Montgomery said quietly. "Public scrutiny comes with the territory." He turned to Abby with regret. "I won't let the foundation collapse." "Do what you have to do," she told him, understanding the stakes. The following weeks brought turmoil. Wells leaked insinuations to the media with painful headlines like "Tech Millionaire's Companion Controls $1 Million Community Fund." Montgomery temporarily stepped down as chairman, though Abby continued her work with renewed determination, expanding programs and securing federal grants. Each success bolstered her professional reputation apart from Montgomery's influence. 3 months later, an independent audit cleared the foundation of any impropriety. That evening, Abby drove to the glass mansion, seeking resolution. She found Montgomery in the atrium working on a new mobility device design. "I thought we should talk," she said, "about what happens now." As they settled into comfortable chairs overlooking the valley at sunset, Montgomery explained that the foundation was secure, with Wells having apologized and withdrawn his objections. "I've missed this," Abby admitted. "Being here, talking, with you, everything." "I've missed you too," Montgomery replied, "more than I can express." Abby revealed she had turned down a prestigious job offer as Director of Rural Development for a national non-profit. "Because my life is here, my family, my community, you." She knelt beside his wheelchair, taking his hands in hers. "I've spent these months thinking about what I truly want. At first, I thought I needed to choose between my independence and my feelings for you. But that's a false choice. I'm establishing my own foundation separate from yours but potentially collaborative. My parents are donating part of the orchard for a sustainable agriculture research center that I'll direct, independent of your influence." Your own vision, Montgomery understood. Your own power base. "So when we're together, it's not the poor farm girl and the rich benefactor. It's two leaders, each with their own resources, choosing to build something together." "And where would we live?" Montgomery asked, smiling. "I found a place halfway between town and here, an old stone house with views of both the mountains and valley, neutral territory. You've really thought this through. Because I love you, Ethan Montgomery. Not your money or power. Just you, your mind, your heart, your stubborn determination to change the world." 1 year later, they stood together on the porch of their stone house at sunset. The training center had graduated its 3rd cohort, the business incubator had expanded to 3 counties, and Abby's agriculture center was breaking new ground. Montgomery had found peace with his limitations, focusing on possibilities rather than constraints. Abby had become a respected voice in rural development nationwide. Together, they had created something neither could have imagined that first day, a partnership founded on mutual respect, shared purpose, and freely chosen love. "Any regrets?" Montgomery asked, reaching for her hand. Abby shook her head. "Not one. You?" "Only that it took us so long to find our way here, to this moment, this life." "Some journeys can't be rushed," she replied, leaning against his shoulder. "Some things are worth waiting for." In the orchard beyond, apple blossoms drifted on the evening breeze, symbols of renewal and beauty emerging from dormant possibility. Like those blossoms, their love had defied its unlikely beginnings to become something authentic and enduring, a testament to the transformative power of choice, respect, and the courage to rewrite one's own story. Fim da Historia. Dear listeners, we hope Abby and Ethan's journey from questionable arrangement to authentic love has touched your hearts. For more captivating stories, check out our special playlist by clicking to your left. If you enjoyed this tale of transformation, please subscribe and leave a thumbs up. We bring you unique stories daily that explore life's complexities and human connections.